Welcome everyone. My name is Alfie Vick. I'm the director of the Environmental Ethics Certificate Program and faculty here in the College of Environmental Design. So this Environmental Ethics Seminar is part of a seminar series that's been going on, believe it or not, for 40 years, ever since the establishment of the Environmental Ethics Certificate Program back in 1983. We have about 4 seminars per semester. They're all open to the public, and this seminar in particular is co-sponsored with Cary College of Business and the UGA Interdisciplinary Sustainability Certificate Program. So glad to have these kind of partnerships and collaborations across campus related to sustainability and environmental ethics. Let's see. So I'm going to introduce Tira Byers, who will introduce our speaker. Tira is the director of the UGA Interdisciplinary Sustainability Certificate Program, and she's been a force for sustainability on campus for 20 plus years, has made a huge impact through curriculum development and mentorship of students related to sustainability, and has recently taken on the directorship of the Sustainability Certificate and is doing great things with that. So, Tira.
Thank you. It is my pleasure to introduce our guest speaker today, Joe
Rozza. You got it.
I think I pronounced that right. Has almost 30 years experience as a strategic, environmental, and sustainability leader. He is the Chief Sustainability Officer for Ryan Company, a national real estate development design, construction management, and capital markets firm where he focuses on transforming the relationship between the built and natural environments. Prior to Ryan Company, he served as Director of Sustainability and Resilience at Jacobs, where he led strategy and program development for multiple large companies across many market sectors. Prior to that, he spent 12 years as a Global Water Resource Sustainability Manager at Coca-Cola. He holds a BS in Environmental Engineering from the University of Central Florida and has spoken at TEDx Atlanta. Please join me in welcoming Joe Rozza.
Thank you. That's good. Thank you so much. Well, I'm glad to be here. Just want to get a little bit of a poll from the room. How many folks are studying sustainability with the intent of it being part of your employment in the future? Okay, and how many of you are coming from a business background? And how many coming from a technical background? All right, we got a pretty good spread there. Well, I'll give you a little bit of my personal story. I just like to share that so you know who you're talking to. I've been doing sustainability for a really long time, and I've seen it twist and turn and grow over the years. But for me, it started in 1984. I was 16 back then, and I was part of a youth leadership training program. And I don't know if they still do Boys and Girls State, I don't even know, but I was a Boys State candidate for my high school. I grew up in Orlando, Florida, and it's like a government leadership thing. And I was elected to the House of Representatives, and I wrote a bill to protect streams and rivers from polluted runoff. So, and I presented that on the floor of the state legislature in 1984. I was wearing parachute pants, and I had my Corey Hart haircut. But so, from there, I would say I was motivated by passion because I grew up in Florida. I was kind of a beach guy and a water sports kind of kid, and I saw a lot of what was happening. So it was basic passion that got me kind of interested in the subject. And then, I went to school, and I started to change. My passion never left, but I started to get attracted to the problems. I don't know, everybody's a little bit different. I gravitate toward problems. And so engineering was a good choice for me. And that was back when they didn't really have undergraduate environmental engineering programs. It was one of the first programs in the country. So I studied water, wastewater, air pollution control, solid waste management, stormwater management, even remediation, cleaning up contaminated sites and a lot of the policy and things that went around that. So, then I left and finished school. They eventually kicked me out, in fact, because I was taking too many classes, and they said, you got to go. So I left. And for the academics in the room, I have a bachelor's degree, and I have 186 semester hours. So they made me leave. But I took a lot of interesting classes that I think made me pretty well-rounded. So half of my 30 years have been in consulting, and I've been working with a lot of iconic brands that you would be very familiar with. They're either in your pocket, your refrigerator, or your closet, helping them shape sustainability strategies. And then the other half was really with the Coca-Cola company. And there it was a strategy job. You know, they have one of the largest global supply chains in the world. And they have 1,000 manufacturing plants in 200 countries. And we were creating water stewardship, climate protection, sustainable agriculture, sustainable materials, strategies that we had to drive globally. So, fun little fact, that took me to over 50 countries. I've traveled all over the place, all over Asia, Africa, Latin America, Europe, you name it. I've probably been there. And, you know, it's, at some point you start humming that old B.B. King song, The Thrill Is Gone, right? So when you start getting on a plane and having to fly 20, 30 hours to get places. So, but anyway, so in the course of all of that, we were able to really work on some world-class problems. Back then I was very focused on water stewardship through all these things, and then helping shape some of those other strategies. So we did a lot of quantitative analysis work, which you can now access through the World Resources Institute. We wound up looking at every square kilometer on the planet through the year 2100. We were doing very strategic analytics to understand how climate change, population growth, and economic development were going to affect the global water balance all around the world, and how that would, you know, what that would portend for society and for government and for business. So just a little bit of a thing there. I did publish a paper on water neutrality. It's the only peer-reviewed paper I've ever written. I've written a lot of articles. In 2013, I wrote a paper on water neutrality that was the basis of the Coca-Cola water replenishment and neutrality program. And you know, a lot of the tech companies out there, a lot of food and beverage have taken that on. I take a lot of pride in that work. It was a team effort, but somewhere between $500 million and $1 billion have gone into that strategy now around the world, and it continues to drive investment. And what we did there, we created an equation between an organizational water footprint and the degree to which they invest in communities and watersheds. So the big pivot there is we made it strategic. We said, you know, this is not philanthropy. We don't want to just spray money. We always say the spray, pray, and say strategy, right? Spray some money, pray it does some good, and tell everybody what you're doing. That's not effective, right? So not in the modern era. So we wanted to make this shift, and so we said, how do we create some sort of quantifiable, logical relationship between what we do in the environment and what our business is doing with all the right incentives? We have to shrink our footprint, because if you make your footprint lower, then you have less to do. And we also wanted to complete the circle so that we could make investments in watersheds, in communities, because water is one of those things that undergirds us, our health and our economy. And in developing and emerging economies, we could do something that would help build, quite frankly, markets of the future. So there was a little bit of a circular concept there that we were playing with. Just like to tell that little anecdote because it tells a lot about the way we approach our work in sustainability today. How can we improve sustainability performance, create business value and social value? How do we get that upper right-hand box? That's the question I wake up every day asking myself, because if I just say this is the right thing to do, motivated by passion, I'm going to get a little bit done. But if I can make it very strategic and support the growth and profitability and brands of the company by doing it correctly, we're going to get 10, 100x investment to really help solve the problem. I'm kind of curious, how many of you are worried about climate change? Yeah, so if anybody was doing the math, you know how old I am. And I tell everybody my age and older, I say, you are underestimating how much the next generation really cares about this issue. For us, it can be a problem to work on, but it's causing mental health issues in younger folks. It's a very serious issue. So for companies that are not being sustainable today, you know, it's not good for the environment, it's not good from a marketing standpoint, and it will not be good for the attraction and retention of talent, right, which is the core for really driving value. So just some opening remarks. I just wanted you to know who you were talking to. I would say this, you know, I would encourage you, if you have a comment that you want to share, I love that. If you have a question you want to ask it. Don't wait till the end. It's a small enough group, and you know, I don't really care if we get through all the slides. I guess you guys will get those later. Yeah, there we go.
So you said you wanted to, the only way to make sustainability more like comprehensible and actually able to be implemented into like society is, like you said, if you combine it with like marketing, if you make it strategic for marketing and business, but don't you feel that in and of itself crosses a moral line if you're trying to make what's good for the environment like good for business, because those things like are going to push people to the bottom of society kind of, because they're going to not be able, it's not going to be the most accessible if it's like industry driven. Does that make sense?
No, not entirely. I think some of the underlying logic probably is not the way it plays out in my experience. I think if you're investing in reversing and restoring and promoting a healthy natural environment that supports public health. And, the other thing that we learned is by investing in water projects that help communities, if you do it in a strategic way. Now, if you're just spraying money, you're exactly right. And what you'll see today is I'm talking about a much deeper strategic approach. So we did make some mistakes in the early years, though, to your point. Like we would go in for water-related development assistance in emerging and developing economies, and we would we work with a development aid agency. We would put a project in, we'd take some pictures and fly out of town, and you come back 6 months later, and the women that were supposed to be benefiting from that by not having to tote water all day, they walked right past the well that we put in and went to the river. Why?
There wasn't enough tech. There was something wrong with it.
No, good thoughts, because
they didn't know about it.
No, what we found out is that the act of toting water was a time for the women to be with the girls and separated from the men. So there was this there was just complete blind spots that we had. So we said, well, why don't we locate it, first of all, why don't we ask them what they want?
Right. Well, that's a big thing too, is like
Right.
companies will come in and like just make decisions for entire communities and like what they think is best without actually consulting the people that actually live there.
And the risk with that is those projects, maybe to your point, are not sustainable.
Right.
And what I tell people is you can't do projects like that anymore, because you're going to tell the story of that project, and then 6 months later somebody's going to come into town and the sign is going to be swinging on a rusty nail and it's not working anymore, but you're telling everybody about this cool project you did. So I'm fascinated with water.org. I think they do a good job. You should check them out because they're using market-based solutions to do microfinance with maximum flexibility for the money, the recipients of that money, to do what they think is the appropriate thing to do. But back to the example, I want to make this point because when we went in and started doing water-related development assistance, we said we have to think systematically and more comprehensively. So we went in and we said, well, let's put the well in the right location. Where do you want the well? Can we use that as a platform? Maybe put some shade there, maybe put a little bit of education on HIV/AIDS or other kind of, use it as a platform. Let's go in and put segregated latrines into the school system because when young girls go through puberty, they wash out of the educational systems a lot of times because they can't go into the same bathrooms anymore. It's a very simple problem to solve. And then how do we get clean water at the schools as well so that they have healthier, more attendance at the school and those kinds of things. And then how do we look at agricultural productivity in a sustainable way? So yeah, it's a good question, but I would try to flip the way you were approaching it a little bit. Yep, in the back. Can you talk a little louder? I'm sorry.
I said on the subject of waste going into the water system.
Yep.
What do you have to say about the plastic pollution from the fashion industry regarding the microplastics that are released during washing clothes?
Yeah, I mean, there's too many things that have gone into the water systems. I mean, microplastics is one, full gigantic plastics is another. And then when you look at both municipal and industrial waste in most of the developing and emerging economies, a lot of that is being discharged without any treatment at all. So we have, a whole bunch of places around the world that are discharging bad things into the environment. So I think the right corporate strategy and the line that we towed when we created corporate strategy is we said, you will not do that. That was a corporate policy. We said we will not pollute, even if the local laws don't enforce, because most countries around the world, if you look at their legislation, they'll say you can't do that. But as an enforcement practice, they don't enforce it. And so as a common practice, people are polluting all over the place. And we had to look at some of our business partners, look them dead in the eye and say, we're going to shut it down. We didn't blink. And next thing you know, everything got fixed. So, but the microplastics is a big issue. I think PFAS is another big issue, which there's a lot of ongoing litigation around. That's like a fire retardant and anti-stick material. It concerns me. You know, the bigger strategic thing I would say, and I'm getting philosophical with you, is, you know, when I look back on my 30 years and I look back on what we've done over the years, one of the most confounding things that we did all over the world is we created one-way material flows. You extract, you manufacture, you use, and it just goes into the landfill or back into the environment. So we're trying to get that circularity now to get all those materials back, to protect the environment, to reduce the extraction of raw materials, et cetera. But it's extremely difficult because of the tough economics at each step in those supply chains that you now have to create. And, but there are some limited progress that's being made in that regard. All right, good, I like it. You guys aren't, you're not shy, I like that. Okay. All right, so what I'm gonna do, yep, here we go. All right.
Was there anything that any policy that was introduced in terms of like water, like PFAS regulation that changed the way like Coca-Cola did stuff at least in the US?
Well, you know, that PFAS specifically was not an issue for food and beverage in our case. You know, they had a really good handle. I mean, I'm not there anymore. I really shouldn't speak to them too specifically about it, but I can tell you they had an army of people, chemists and analysts that were looking at everything that was going on with all of that. We had very strict standards, so when it came to wastewater treatment, you know, making sure that that water was returned in a compliant way, and also the second level was to make sure it supported aquatic life. So that was a backstop policy that we had in case the local standards weren't adequate. We wanted to get that. But the other big challenge was for other food and beverage companies, you know, globally. I don't want to talk about that one company because this is a writ large thing. Is the agricultural component? You know, that's a much bigger thing. So we tried to target a lot of our water stewardship efforts into the agriculture space, and this would get into like, you know, obviously more efficient water means less runoff. Smarter agriculture was good, and then riparian buffers and restoring riparian buffers around the stream to give you additional water quality protection for in-stream water quality. So we took a multifaceted approach to that, but yeah, the chemistry of discharges, that's probably the easiest part to manage, you know, honestly. So what I'm going to give you guys is a bit of a strategy discussion. So, you know, this is going to get a little bit abstract and a little wonky at times. But this is the pathway that I've learned over my years of experience on how to actually change, right? You know, if I'm in a colorful, funny mood, I would say my job is change management. I'm an infiltrator, an influencer, and an integrator. You know, how do you get in, how do you influence, and then how do you integrate that into the way the organization makes decisions? So, you know, and I'll just say one more thing before I get into it. So I started out with passion, then I got into problems, and then I got into value. And so today we've reached the point where there's real value in getting it right. Financial value, risk management value, brand value, and market value. So we'll try to hit on all that. And if you get to that level where you can make the case, and what I tell everybody is, it's on you. It's been on me for 30 years, but I'm going to be checking out soon, so it's going to be on your backs, right? And what happens in this world is, you know, you champ at the bit. You want that leadership opportunity. You want that cool project to work on. You want to make things happen. And you get frustrated, and then all of a sudden everybody just heaves it onto your back. That's what happens. So they thrust it on you right when you're, you know. So the thing is make sure you're learning these theories, learning how to diplomacy, learning change management. So when they do thrust it onto your shoulders, you'll be ready for it. So anyways, I'll hit on a little bit of the general state of sustainability in the built environment sector. I'll tell you a little bit about the company that I work for. I'm going to give you one little, probably for some of the academics in the room, a fairly simplistic understanding of corporate strategy and how we go about doing it. It'll be very fundamental, but I will tell you it's also very effective. And then I'll show you our strategy on what we did. And then I want to kind of end with a little bit of you know, how we develop the programs, because that's the integration into the enterprise. Talk a little bit about the role of CSO. If you all are, whoever's going into sustainability, you know, at some point, kind of the pinnacle of your career track will be some kind of chief sustainability officer. I don't know what they're going to call it when you guys are at that point, but I want to talk about that a little bit. So who is Ryan Companies? We're a privately held, we do about $4 billion a year of business here in the United States. We're commercial real estate. How many people know like commercial real estate and built environment? Who has an understanding of that? Yeah, it's just a handful of hands. So the one thing, if you're ever talking to anybody in the commercial real estate world, you have to ask them, what do you mean? What does your company do? Because they're all different kind of types of things. So what we do is we do real estate development. So that's the conceptual, finding a piece of property, figuring out what would work on that property, what's needed by the market. We do architectural and engineering, so we design the buildings. We construct the buildings. We manage a little over 20 million square feet of real estate. And then we have a capital markets where we source the debt and equity to get these deals to move forward. And we also sell buildings. We're an owner sometimes, 100% owner sometimes. A lot of times we're a minority equity stake. And then a lot of times, the majority of the times, we're just providing a service to the market to get them the buildings that they need. Now we do that in some core sectors. We do that in industrial, so a lot of e-commerce logistics buildings, so distribution centers and warehouses. How many of you all have ordered something from your phone, right? So yeah, I'm not even going to ask you to raise your hands. So you know, that means, so we're helping build a lot of that infrastructure that get those goods to move to where they need to be. We do a lot of food and beverage, manufacturing plants, advanced manufacturing, and like data centers and things like that. So that's our industrial business. And we also do healthcare, medical office buildings and outpatient centers and things like that. A lot of times we own those buildings. And then we do senior living, multifamily, and then we'll do some office space on occasion and a lot of retail space. But what you'll see is the vast majority of what we focus on are core to the American economy. These are not casinos, they're not hotels. These are things that, you know, we have an aging population with rising demand for apartments. You know, healthcare is going to be around forever, and everybody's going to continue to punch on their phones and order things. So we're kind of core to the American economy. So I've already mentioned these different service lines: development, design, construction management, and cap markets. That, for us, we feel that's a really important capability, because whenever we're entering a deal, it might just be construction, but we can bring the perspective of a developer, the perspective of a design firm. We can look at capital markets and how that property might make money or lose money in the future. So we call this collective insight, but it's really powerful. And as a sustainability professional, when I saw that, I knew that I could have an impact in the built environment, because I knew that this was going to be a capability that if I can get sustainability into development thinking, into design thinking, into more sustainable construction, if I can access cheaper debt and equity to drive more sustainability performance, I could start to pick up a spread and get more market demand for more sustainable buildings, right? So this was really important for me as somebody that wants to have impact in the natural environment on sustainability. Okay, this is a slide that summarizes about 30 slides, but I just want to talk a little bit about the business case here. So you can see more or less dimensionally, you'll see kind of the impact piece. So how many people know 40% of the greenhouse gas emissions that are emitted into the world every year come from buildings? That's a big, big number, right? And about 3/4 of that are the operating assets, heating and cooling a building and lights and all of that. And the other 25% is the carbon that is embodied in the material. So it was the carbon that was emitted for the concrete, steel, glass, aluminum, all the materials. So 40% of the world's greenhouse gas emissions come out of buildings. So when I sat down with our leadership, I was like, did you know? And they were like, we did not know. I said, okay. So this is a big deal, and it's not just an emotional thing. I'm like, this is massive exposure, because as the world gets wanting to decarbonize, we've got to get out ahead of this. We've got to start shrinking it down, because it's not a question of when we're going to be under enormous pressure. It's going to be, it's not if, it's when, excuse me. So I wanted to talk, I have a passion for this water stuff, all of it, but I spent a long time in water. And, water stress has increased. How many people are aware of or catch it in the news about water stress around the country, around the world? Raise them high so I can see. Yeah, that's right. it's going to get worse. You know, I've been modeling, I told you, in 2000, from 2005 to 2009, we spent 7 figures modeling all of this. And we made the data available. When, you know, we built the models, a previous employer, and we spent a lot of money on it. And then I was like, now we have to give it away. And like, what are you talking about? So we got to give it to the World Resource Institute so that the whole world can make better decisions. You know what I mean? Any one organization can cease to exist and the water needle is not going to move. Everybody's got to make better decisions before we start to de-stress. So what we try to show, and if you think about trying to build a building, what we want to start to bring into the decision making is, if you're going to be in the southwestern United States, you better know what the water stress levels are. You better know what they are today, and you better know what they're going to be in 2030 and 2040 and 2050. These assets are 50, 60-year assets. So we want to make sure. And with the water, it's not just supply reliability of the water, right? I mean, we're getting questions that have an emotional component. But if the community is if they're struggling to meet their basic water needs, and you're building a big water hog in that community, the community is not going to like it, and you risk reputation, company reputation and brand risk. So big deal there. So we try to bring that in. Water stress is increasing. I've been studying this issue for a long time. We always did the pessimistic, the optimistic, and the middle of the road scenarios to get a spread in what was going on. And we always did the middle of the road, and every time we kind of did more or less a qualitative back test, we said, we should have went with the pessimistic. It's getting worse. So bad problems on water, and that's a big deal. Obviously, we're seeing a lot of news about the rising heat stress, around projects. July was the hottest month on record. I guess everybody knows this now. I see a hand up. A little bit louder, buddy. I'm sorry.
Sorry, I was just wondering if there's a lot of water stress. This includes the high usage of the water and aqueducts down this great aqueduct down the Great Plains.
So let me play with your question a little bit. So what's the base information is domestic, industrial, and agricultural water use, and the relationship between that demand and the average annual renewable supply. So it's a broad spectrum kind of metric of supply and demand. What it doesn't factor in are the major infrastructure adaptations that have occurred that may change the stress in a certain level. So in some locations, like Southern California is flaming red, but there's a big transfer of water into Southern California from the Central Valley in the north, and so they have put in infrastructure. So the proper interpretation of this data is, okay, that place is flaming red. It's got an enormous dependency on whatever mitigation they've put into place. What's the plan? So it kind of alters your focus a little bit. So this is an indicator system that tells you need to go deeper in certain places to understand, have they adequately adapted to their endowment? Yeah, it's a good question. It's a little bit deeper. Yeah. So July was the hottest month on record, a lot of heat stress. And since they started keeping temperature records in 1850, July was the hottest. Okay. So for the built environment, what does that mean? Just heat stress alone. That means when we're building buildings, we got worker health and safety issues. We got potential workman comp claims. If you mix in the climate risk there, we have the possibility for ongoing projects to be, partially constructed and destroyed, or flooding to impact schedules. And in the construction world, schedule is king. They can sometimes absorb a little bit extra cost here and there, but they've got to keep the schedule. So there's a lot of risks during the construction phase. And then you think about a $30, $50, $200, $300 million asset that you've put onto the market. And as heat stress increases, you've got greater cooling demands. You got growing water climate risks to that asset. So there's just a lot of things that we need to be thinking about from a heat stress and climate perspective. So the other thing, yeah, I'm sorry, yeah.
Are you going to get into the specifics about like how your construction or, your real estate is like more sustainable than the typical ways?
I'll show you the levers that we're pulling on.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then also, I was just wondering, do you do any work with like, I don't know, it's just like, how do you, no offense, but like, how do you justify like development in terms of sustainability when there are so many stressors on the environment already?
Yeah.
And then, so it's kind of just like,
Yeah.
Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think you could look at just about every, I don't mind your questions. I mean, I appreciate the passion behind them. You know, you have a choice. You can, or you can try to redirect the train to a more sustainable path. You know, in my experience, getting on the train, getting the controls, and steering it in the right direction is a better path. In my experience, it's not, you know, realistic to think that, you know, just the way the property rights and the way the economy and everything is set up, you know, we don't have the laws on the books and the policy and the case law and all that to do what you want to do. But I think if I took your ideas and I said, well, how do I work within the system? How do you increase the conservation value? You know, do we need to develop every square inch of that piece of property? Or, you know, and if you've got a passion for this, I'm going to put a challenge back on you. If you really want to make a difference, figure out an innovative way to reuse existing space in a way that you can get that deal to pencil. That's a big passion area of mine. I don't know how to do it. You know, I mean, you know, office space in the country is down to 50% occupancy. In some cities, it's down to 10%. We got all these vacant buildings, and I keep talking to people. How do you? Maybe we can convert that to multifamily and not build a multifamily. How do we get that to work? It's very difficult.
A big thing that people are wanting is, because everything is work from home now and everything is so digitized, that it's like these office buildings, like the occupancy, like you said, is super down. There are pressures on local authorities to turn those into lower income housing or like affordable housing, because they're literally just like multi-million dollar office buildings sitting there empty with like nobody in them, and then there's
That's
people
right.
dying on the street.
We're saying the same thing.
Okay, great.
Yeah. Now, that's a problem you should work on.
Yeah.
I mean, there's an academic
No,
component.
like it is good that you guys are doing that. That's great.
No, we are thinking about it. I'm telling you, I'd love to make some of that stuff happen, but when you talk to all the experts in the space, they'll tell you, and convincingly, we can't get it to work economically. Because retrofitting a building, it's called the floor plate of a building, retrofitting that from office to multifamily is a lot of work. And it's incredibly labor intensive because all the heating and electrical and all the major systems were designed for a floor, not individual units. So you got to put a lot more infrastructure into the building. So I'm trying to do a little bit of intellectual judo on you. It's using the weight of your passion and flinging you in a direction where I think, you know, you have the fuel. I would say that's a problem that really needs attention. And it's going to require some market innovation, some social innovation, public policy, plus some real design and real innovation in means and methods of construction. It's not a trivial problem. I thought it was easy too until they beat me about the head. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, no, it's good stuff. I appreciate the passion. So where am I? Okay, so the other thing too is on this rise of net zero carbon commitments, right? So if you look at the Climate Pledge, which is organized by Amazon and Global Optimism, they just crossed 450 companies have committed to net zero carbon emissions, scope 1, 2, and 3 by 2040, right? So that's a big deal. So anybody who's doing business now, I mean, with those companies are saying scope 1, 2, and 3 means I need all my business partners to do that too. So there's this kind of this ripple effect that's happening. And then when you look at, this is getting wonky, I'm sorry about that, but the Federal Acquisition Regulation, that's the regulation that governs how the United States government procures contract services, excuse me. Any contractor doing more than $50 million a year with the US government, if that rule goes through, is going to be required to disclose their carbon footprint. They're going to be required to have science-based targets, which means they have to be consistent with the Paris Agreement, so they have to go to net zero by 2050. And that represents $650 billion a year of annual spend, you know? So all the companies that are going to be on board with that. So you look at these market dynamics, I tell everybody, I appreciate your philosophical opinions, but it doesn't matter. The market is moving in this direction. And at some point, my crystal ball is saying, and it's just my crystal ball, but it's saying, hey, if you're not on the net zero carbon, if you're not decarbonizing and, you know, and committed to that in 3 or 4 years, you're going to start to see the market is going to start boxing you into a smaller market because we can't do business with you because you are not net zero also. That is a big deal, very big deal. And then the increasing transparency. This is, the Security Exchange Commission has got a rule that's about to drop that's going to require all publicly traded companies to calculate their carbon footprint, disclose their carbon footprint, evaluate the materiality of climate-related risks to their business, and put all that out in the public domain. So this is going to be this big moment of sunshine that's going to illuminate. One second, let me finish this point. I'll come to you. So when so a lot of companies now more or less voluntarily do that, or they're under shareholder pressure to talk about climate-related risks, right? This gets into financial disclosures, 10Ks, and things like that. So, but if this policy goes through, all publicly traded companies are going to have to. Now, that'll be a really interesting moment because people think one industry's doing a lot, but wait a minute, this little sleeper over here is emitting a whole bunch of carbon. We didn't know that. So I think data is going to create a lot of transparency, and it's going to reset our understanding of things. Yeah.
Based on your own experience, how long do you think it's going to be before we actually get the private sector to?
Well, I would say that you guys, I keep disagreeing with you, and I don't mean to do that. But when I tell you 450 companies have already committed to net zero carbon emissions in the last 4 years, the private sector is moving on that. You know, the United States government, you could argue, is a little bit of a laggard there because they're still mincing over the terms of the Federal Acquisition Regulation revisions there. And then, you know, companies like Coca-Cola, you know, and PepsiCo and Diageo and Intel and Google and Meta and all these companies have committed to water neutrality, and they're putting hundreds of millions of dollars into that. I just think you're missing the visibility on that because it's so hard to communicate with the public now because everybody has a million different pathways to get information. You know what I mean? So my advice to everybody is, I'll come to you in a second, buddy. My advice is take a minute. It takes about 15 minutes to jump on the website of a company and read their sustainability report. I've got X-ray vision on that. I can read it and I can tell you, are they legit or are they not? You know? And the ones that are not legit, they're kind of changing because they're not for real. But there's a real opportunity, you know, I think the private sector is moving up. Could more be done? 100%. Yeah. Yep.
I'm just curious, whenever you use terminology like net zero by 2040 or 2050,
Yeah.
and talking about reducing your carbon footprint, does that mean like trying to get close to zero emissions, eliminate emissions, or does that mean offsetting emissions via carbon offsets, which is like somewhat decent?
Yeah, for good reason. Yeah. Look, there are good offsets out there. I'm just not in the market for them. You know, yet, what I keep telling everybody is I want to decarbonize. I want to reduce emissions. You know, so we're working with suppliers. I'll hit on this in a minute. But, and we have a lot of suppliers. We're sending powerful market signals, you know, back up into the supply chain to say, hey, we're net zero. And we have $4 billion worth of business every year. If you want to keep doing business with us, we need you on this journey. You know what I mean? And so they're decarbonizing their manufacturing of materials. And then in the buildings, you know, there's kind of like 3 levels, the easy stuff, lighting and all of that. And then there's sort of the heating and air systems, and then full electrification. There's sort of a 3-step process. You can get super efficient, and then you go full electric with renewables. So I've built out a full decarbonization pathway that I have line of sight to about 80% decarbonization without ever thinking about an offset. Yeah. Yeah, you got to be, but it's, are you familiar with the blue ocean concept, blue ocean strategy, anybody? A couple of head nods. You know, so what we've had to do is we had to think a little bit outside of the box, and we had to say, how can we create a new market opportunity? And that's where that supplier strategy came in, where we can get lower carbon materials for lower unit pricing and speed that transition. Now, I tell you, I'm a beat up, haggard old guy at this point, but I'm perfectly comfortable taking a 5% gain every year for the next 15, 20 years. If we can just lock in 5% lower this year, 5% next year, and just keep marching that number down, we'll be fine. You know? Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So I know that you were talking about like 150
Companies.
have committed to reaching these goals, and I'm not sure what it's like in the business
Yeah.
And I was wondering if that is a problem that we see when it comes to different businesses, or if you foresee that being a problem where there are these commitments, but the actions to achieve those commitments and goals aren't necessarily sufficient.
Yeah, well, I think that's good, good observation. I think each country has their own sort of, level of commitment. I mean, a lot of them have signed the Paris Agreement, so in spirit and philosophically, they're aligned to that. My advice is, and they're starting to take actions, right? The Federal Acquisition Rule is a good example of the U.S. government. The Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and the Inflation Reduction Act are all major policy components where they're trying to decarbonize the federal government's operations and create incentives for the private sector. So I think you're seeing in the United States some policy things that are really, China, I'm not an expert on China. I used to travel there a lot. I don't really know what they're doing so much on this, but I think they're more around the economic development opportunities of green economy technology, which is also, a big contributor. But I would say this, and this is just my personal opinion, the market is moving. The market is moving. Companies are saying, we got to de-risk this. We've got to become more sustainable because the people that buy our goods and services care. So, I kind of bifurcate what the government's doing, and I'd say we could use your help with incentives and tax credits and whatever, but the market is moving, and now that the private sector, both from a value chain perspective, suppliers, producers of goods and services and the end users of those goods and services and how we generate value, that's where that blue ocean concept, we've got to figure out how to embed sustainability in that way that creates new markets and creates more business opportunities. And we're kind of like right at the early stages. I mean, I think you all are going to be, more important, on this subject going forward, with that innovative thinking and taking that passion and just saying, okay, what do we need to do differently? Which is what I'll give you a couple of examples of how we've done that. Yeah, I love it. You guys all have good questions. Well, that's slide number 2. Okay. All right. So, yeah, go ahead.
I know you're saying that companies are trying to decarbonize entirely, but how would it be, like an example would be creating like electric cars to decarbonize, but I've seen another problem arise with that, like such as the lithium batteries that companies use that also create a
Yeah.
great amount of pollution when they're not used.
Yeah. Well, I do get that kind of question about cobalt and lithium and the pollution related to that. I think I'm going to kind of be I'm not an expert on the subject, but what I will tell you is that the technology is moving where we're getting, it's going to change, the technology will change over time. So the transition to non-fossil fuel transportation is critically important to climate change. And don't get mad at me, but when people point at lithium and cobalt and they talk about those issues on that, I said, well, let's just put that next to coal. Let's put that next to oil. And you tell me which one's worse. Okay? I mean, that's welcome to my world. You got to pick sometimes the best worst option or whatever, the least worst option. It's a game of trade-offs that you have to do. But then again, you're on a thesis. So then that's an innovation opportunity to say, okay, how do we decouple from some of those social and environmental costs? How do we make it better? But that's a big step change better. When you look at worker health and safety, the emissions, public health, you just, you got to look at it objectively and in a balanced view and say, oh, we're going to go with the least impactful thing now because we can eliminate all of that. And then we'll work on that smaller problem later. I appreciate it. That's good. All right. So this is the simplistic strategy slide I want to go over. But if you really are trying to drive change within an enterprise, right? If you're trying to make good things happen within a company, this is a little bit of a playbook on how we've done it. And I'll give you the punchline. I went from zero sort of interest when I joined the company. Within 8 months, we signed a net zero carbon commitment. So it was lightning fast. So So this, I'll go through these different stages, but I will tell you that the process of strategy is almost more important than the results of that. So this is about your skill set, is diplomacy, is being nimble-minded to, you know, I speak 5 languages, you know. I speak senior executive, I speak supply chain, I speak media, I speak NGO, I speak community. These are all different languages. My objectives are always clear, what I'm trying to accomplish, but I'm not going to talk to an executive about something that's unrelated to business strategy and risk and, you know, and business development. So, so that's really important. You know, strategy, I always describe strategy documents. They're smudgy, fingerprinted, bent corners. They're messy documents because everybody's tacking them and tearing them apart, you know. So I'll just kind of hit on that. But, you know, the other thing I had to do is I had to build a team. So this was very strategic. I said I need every function and every department and every region represented in the process of the strategy. So I needed to recruit all these people. So, you know, you can see our chief operating officer. I'm up there, and, you know, we got a lot of other heads of different functions there, plus some rank and file. So I'm just going to quickly pop through these. But on the discovery phase, so if you're, whatever business you're in, if you're working for a private sector or, you know, a company, you know, you need to understand how do they make money, you know, what are the, who is buying their services, what are the commitments and sustainability goals of their business ecosystem, you know, what are the risks that, you know, sustainability portends for their enterprise, what are the opportunities that sustainability could create for that enterprise, very fundamental. So we had to go through and look at that. We looked at some of the policy trends like the SEC disclosure, the FAR, some of the things I've mentioned a minute ago, some of the rising risks around water, et cetera. And then you got to look, you know, this is why I like the chief sustainability officer role, because I'm in the business strategy and I'm saying, you know, have you thought about this? We can create new market opportunities here. We're looking to grow into this particular sector. Did you know that 90% of the companies in that sector are committed to net zero carbon? Were you aware of that? You know, and we can start to leverage sustainability to help them meet their goals and things. So that's the discovery phase. That's like you doing research and getting your facts straight and having a good plan. And then the stakeholder piece, what we did a lot of time, I did this in 3 rounds. It's going to seem really simple, but it works. The first thing I did is I came on board, once I had the discovery piece, I sat down with all these stakeholders and I said, look, we got to become more sustainable. We've got to decarbonize. We've got to get better on water. We've got to get better on conservation. What do you see is going to be my biggest challenges? What are the barriers? What do you think what has to be true for us to be successful with this subject? It was an open conversation, and I listened. And people said, you know, and when you join a company, there's a, I don't know if you know who Jenny Romedy is. She was CEO of IBM for many years. She has a great quote. She said, when you first join a company, you have this golden period where people will tell you the truth. You know, and then things get back, and it's a little bit of a quip, but at the beginning, everybody's very candid. Like, I don't think you knock it, you know, short asset hold time in real estate is a big problem. Stakeholders involved in the early stages aren't involved in the long term. So they just gave me all this feedback on things that they saw were barriers to success, what had to be true, and all that kind of thing. That was very valuable. Then I came back after that, and I said, okay, well, here's a more synthesized version of the business case. Here is a little bit of an initial framework for a strategy. Remember you told me this? Well, here it is in the strategy. Remember you told me that? Here it is in the strategy. Let me just show you how your feedback was weaved into this. You know, and then we come back with more of a final version of that. You know, and so they've had 3 layers of discussion with them. Very simple, but at the end, I had a strategy document that everybody felt like they had a line of sight to their contribution to that strategy. And then you go to your, you know, your board and your executive leadership team. What I always tell everybody is the first sentence out of your mouth is, we've met with all the leads of all the functions, all the regions. Everybody agrees this is the business case and this is the strategy going forward. That knocks 90% of the questions off the table. Because the first thing they're going to say is, did you talk to? Yeah, I did. Did you talk? Yes, I did. Did you? Yeah, okay. So we just talked to everybody. This is everybody's document. That was very important. But you also have to show you have to show plans. So I said, look, we need to make a net zero carbon commitment. We got to get totally decarbonized. Here's the pathway. The gentleman asked about offsets. We had a full decarbonization pathway laid out. You know, we showed him how we were going to get there. And I said, and you need to sign this piece of paper. We're going net zero. So So, and then you do program design. I'll give you some details here, but so strategy is PowerPoint. Programs is where it's the executional phase of your strategy. So you have to have very well-designed programs that have to be fully integrated into the business. These terms sometimes are hard to relate to. I'll try to give you some examples. And then, today I have to sit down with these plans, and I have to sit down with the business integration and operational excellence teams in the corporate functions. I've got to sit down with IT. I've got to sit down with them. So we have to integrate this into all the decision making that we're making across the enterprise. How do we do that? Because what you don't want to do is you don't want to create processes that are sustainability processes off to the side. That is not going to be successful. Trust me, I've tried it about 4 times. I've failed miserably every time. We have to say, no, where are we making business decisions and how do we integrate sustainability into that? Very important. So, and then one of the things that a lot of sustainability professionals leave out is annual business planning. So I start usually around July. I start talking to all the leaders around the company. I start saying these are the priorities for 2024. This is the budget that I recommend for your team. This is what I'm recommending to the executive leadership team. You should be aware of that. These things are all starting to, so it's kind of a teamwork thing with a little bit of a nudge coming in from what I call high angle pressure, coming down from the management team. Annual business planning is very important. So here's our strategy. We call it Thriving Sustainably, and it's based on this vision that sustainable real estate solutions that protect and restore the planet enable communities and businesses to thrive together. That's our central belief. That's our vision. We said that can be true if we do this correctly. And it's part of an overall Ryan impact strategy. How are we doing on time? I can't even tell. We're getting close, right? We're okay? All right. So, so you can see the Thriving Sustainably. So we have, transforming places, which is more the social community impact component, Thriving Sustainability, environmental, and then we have diversity, equity, and inclusion, and safety, and those kinds of things are all wrapped up in this. So for us, we had to kind of separate the company. Like I said at the very beginning, commercial real estate, you always have to double click on who you're talking to and find out what services they actually provide, what kind of company they are. Well, we do. We have our own corporate operations. That's our offices and our fleet and our travel and all the basic things that involve carbon. But then we have projects where we have total control over that. So we have accountability for the carbon footprint on that. That's a different situation to when we're doing more of a service to the market where the clients are making the decisions around what they spend money on. So we're more in an influence role there in a service provision. So we had to separate that. That was a function of all the feedback I got when I did that stakeholder engagement. But you can see there, we wanted to position this in a way, how do we improve sustainability performance and drive value? We said we got to get to that upper right-hand box to get real scale to reverse the impact on the environment. So we said our objectives are to support the growth and profitability of the company. We want to reduce the environmental impact on the environment, right? We want to reduce the environmental impact of development. And then again, like we talked about at the beginning, this is really important to the future workforce, for people where they want to work. So you could be an accountant, you can be a construction worker, you can be what, but you want to be part of something that's bigger than that. You want to have a little bit of this, something to help solve the climate crisis and things like that. So we said, well, we need to have market-based solutions because we want things to be pulled forward by economic incentive. So we had to think a little bit differently. I'll give you an example on how we did that. And we had to have a very hyper-focus on individual clients. Each client is on their own journey from a sustainability standpoint. We had to get inside their head. We had to understand what their goals and commitments were. What you see in sustainability quite often is a company will have sustainability goals and commitment, but they haven't trickled down all the way into all the places where they're procuring services or buying things, So there's typically a gap between the corporate sustainability strategy and how the company is really doing business. So we're aware of that. So that's a little bit of what's embedded in that statement. So, I'll leave it at that. But, we did sign the climate pledge. So we're committed to, net zero carbon by 2040, like I mentioned earlier. I'm in the early stages of making a water commitment. I mentioned earlier I'm a big water neutrality fan. So how do we make that work as well? My vision for the future personally is we should have net zero carbon buildings that are also water neutral in ways that are supporting the local communities. both their economies and socially. That can be done. We've done it before around the world. It can happen now, and there can be a really good reason why companies want to do that. So I'll try to tap through some of this. Look at the graphic on the right, though. People oftentimes ask me, what's your best practice for, and I'll say, well, they want to hear lower carbon concrete, lower carbon steel, more material circularity. That's all embedded in that. But if you really want to drive sustainability in a company, pay attention to that thing on the right. How do you integrate it into the business? Do you have the right processes and tools to support decision making? Are you giving visibility to the environmental consequences of certain decisions? Are you giving them a business case for when they should do the right thing? And stage one is stop doing the dumb things, start doing the smart things, the easy smart things. And then you get onto the tougher problems as you go forward. Partnerships become essential here. So that's partnership with your suppliers, that's partnership with your clients, that's partnerships with local government, partnerships with NGOs and conservation groups. Partnership is a broad concept, but that helps us bring in some new models for getting some things done. So if we do a project in a location and we say, okay, we've shrunk the water footprint as much as we can, now we need to go water neutral. We're going to have to partner with local conservation organizations, local governments that understand the local water issues, stack the money to say, okay, in addition to the development, we're going to do this to create an offset. I hate to use that word, but we're going to sustainably balance the water that's being used on that site so that project is now water neutral in a way that supports the local community and the watershed. That's a partnership model. It's a little bit different. So this gets at, you were asking some questions about some specifics, so this gets into a little bit of that. I'm not going to get into details here because I will knock you out. You'll go straight to sleep. But you can see climate protection, water stewardship, and you can see some of the core things we're doing under there. Driving energy efficiency, doing things like electrification to drop emissions. We're looking at increasing renewable supply, and then that sustainable balance component. So how do we achieve a balance? It might be an offset, maybe not. What I would prefer to do is do direct community impact investing and do something that creates carbon sequestration or something like that in the local community. So we're working on that. But I think from a strategy standpoint, you can see all the specifics here, but each program has a certain design to it. We have a vision, we have a clear set of mission, we have a clear set of objectives. We've got a whole framework for how to do that. I'll give you an example in a second. But you've got to plan out your training, your guidance, how you're going to build organizational capability to drive that. Too many young sustainability professionals, they take that passion, they say, we got to get this one sustainable concrete moving everywhere. It doesn't get anywhere until you programatize things. A multi-year roadmap. What I found is if you give people some easy steps to get started, year one, that's smart. Ease people into it. Let's do the smart, easy, simple things that drive value. So here's an example of more detailed design. It's a project we did. We were able to get a lot of panels on it. I'm going to tap through this. Some of this stuff is pretty wonky, but we know that because of our business model, we have an opportunity. The earlier we get involved in the development phase and we start bringing some of these tools and some of the things that we've been talking about, we can maximize the sustainability performance. But once you get to the point where a guaranteed maximum price, that's a construction terminology. Say we're going to build the building for this amount of money. Once you have that locked in, it's very hard to change what's going to happen. So we're trying to identify the pro forma. That's when the economics of a deal is originally structured and agreed upon. We want to be involved before that and then before the GMP is set. I'm sorry, this is so very, very specific to the built environment. But we want to look at things like, the net operating income of the asset and all the business economics at the front end. What's happening today is they're looking at interest rates, leasing, market, very simplistic financial decision. We want to bring some of these more compelling parameters in. I'm trying to go faster. So I'm going to go. I don't know why my karate slide isn't showing up. There it is. All right. I'm going to land this because we've covered a lot, and I think the questions kind of pulled out a lot of what we're going to say in the other slides. But this is probably my my opus for 30 years in sustainability. So, this is what people think it is. It's hugging trees. A lot of people, I've been doing this for really, people think I'm like, which I am kind of a passionate person. I told you my story. I am very passionate about this. But at the same time, the middle slide is what it feels like. And sometimes I'm the guy on the left and sometimes I'm the guy on the right. Okay? Just depends. But you get beat up a lot. You got to be tough in this space. You got to be handle tough questions. You got to have people challenging you. It's fine. No problem. You got to be ready for that. But that's what it is on the right. This is business. So what I've laid out for you today is more a sustainability business strategy, not a sustainability plan. Those are two very different things. This is a business strategy. Kind of flew over that in great detail. I thought what I would want to do, though, is just land on what my job is, because I think you all are trying to think about a career in sustainability. I just wanted to tell you what it is. So these are the kind of core skills. Consuming all kinds of information, understanding the major dynamics and the issues technically, policy, politically. You need to really get committed to feeding that in. I talk to a lot of students, and a lot of them are waiting for somebody to anoint them as a sustainability professional. Yes, you are one now. You can go, no, you were one. You are all a sustainability professional right now. Start assuming the identity. Start reading the stuff. Start writing papers. You got professors that can help you fine-tune some of your ideas and your theories of change. Public affairs and communications, you've got to be a very good communicator, a presenter, a talker. You've got to be able to share ideas. You've got to speak those 5 languages I was joking about earlier. Very important. Innovation is an important skill set. It's going to be more important for you. I'm trying to do more of that, but it's going to be critical for you all. And then governance, reporting, government relations, organizational capability development, and people leadership. And I'll sort of land on that. People leadership, what I've learned over the years, it's really quite simple. What I think about a lot of times when I'm talking to people is how am I making that person feel when I'm talking to them? Sometimes it's a strategic conversation. Sometimes it's a disagreement, which is, I love disagreement because good ideas come out of that. There's always a third way. But I think you're, investing in your emotional intelligence and making sure that you are somebody that cares about the way other people feel, even when you have to say what you have to say. Your perspective is very important. But I just found it's very simple. Whenever I'm talking to somebody, really personally or professionally, that's what I'm thinking about. How am I making that person feel? Now, I've got an objective and a reason why we're talking. How am I making them feel? Like we disagree on some things, I say we disagree, but let's talk about it. It's okay. So that's a little bit of my job. I was an engineer that kind of learned all of this. My recommendations is if you're technically oriented, get good at public speaking. If you're more of a business person, make sure you get rooted in some technical basis because that's going to help you. But that was a journey across the spectrum. We could probably talk for days, but I'll land it there. We can do a little discussion. I'm here as long as you guys want. Okay, we got one over here. Yeah.
How do you make sure that sustainability is happening throughout the company? Do you have a team that overlooks each department, or do you have a goal where you're trying to hire more people that are sustainable or have a sustainable background? So how do you incorporate throughout the business?
Well, let's talk. I'll answer the question. There's a lot of dimensions to your question, but I'll address the human resources piece and kind of the operating model. So really for me, and there's different schools of thought out there, what I do is I have a core team, okay, at corporate, and then I've got full-blown sustainability trained experts in key areas of the company. And then for all the other functions, I've got a fraction of an FTE in all the other areas where the core team and that extended core team are experts on various aspects of sustainability within their given sector. The other people are embedded within their respective functions, and I focus, this is very important, I made a big mistake early in my career. I used to try to educate them on the technicalities of it all. I don't do that anymore. I said, I need to enhance their sustainability management skill set. You need to understand the broad spectrum issues, the strategy, what we're trying to do, and so it's a hybrid model, but I found that to be, over the years, the most effective. The other part of your question was more around business strategy and think about some of the supplier stuff we were talking about. Thought I saw a hand.